Well, hello. How are you all this evening? I'm going to put this on both channels, so welcome to both Integrative Preparedness and American Reversion. You'll see how this applies to both in a second. I want to talk tonight about a killing by police of a young man, a teenager. I would call it a murder, that occurred here in Overland Park, Kansas, 3 years ago. It's a case that I'm personally familiar with. I saw the officer involved shortly after it happened. The mother of the young man who was killed was principal at my son's school. A good friend of mine was involved in moving for community oversight of this and the police department. And so I have a lot of information about it. I don't know how much I'll add to this, but it's one that I've been wanting to get to for several weeks, but I've been snowed under. Probably just as well because the feds finally came out with their finding on this, and I'll read that at the end. Usually at this point, I'll hold up my books and tell everybody, who our sponsor is and how to buy my books and all that. I'm not going to do that tonight because I don't want to use this story as a way to promote my books. This is not a money-making situation. This is something that more and more people ought to realize and understand. This happens far too often in our country nowadays. It applies to both channels because when we're talking about preparedness, we have to be prepared to deal with out-of-control authority, which is happening more often, and it applies to American Reversion for the same reason. We have out-of-control authority, and things need to be done about it. I'm going to read this, and then I'll make a couple of comments. And then I only put links in stories over on the Patreon channel. But I'm going to put the link to this Washington Post story, which includes video of the whole call, including dispatchers and everything, and it shows the shooting itself. And I'm going to put the link to that down in the information box above the links to my other stuff, my channels and my books, because I want everybody to go to that link. And I hope that everybody will watch the Washington Post video on it. I hope you will, and I hope you'll send it to as many people as you can think of. Okay, that's the purpose of this. Like I say, it's been a couple of weeks since I read the article. I don't know what they've left out, what they include. Anything that I think needs to be added at the end, I will, or sometime during. And now I'll just read it. It says, this is a Washington Post article. It's from August 23rd, written by Tom Jackman, Sarah Callan, Joy Sharon Yee, Athar Mirza, and Brian Monroe. So it says, the headline is Inside the Investigation of an Officer Who Killed a Teen Threatening Suicide. Now I'll read the article. When 17-year-old John Albers posted threats of suicide on social media in January 2018, worried friends called 911 for help. 911. Okay. The high school student was backing his family minivan out of the garage when he was shot 13 times by an Overland Park, Kansas police officer who responded to the call. Within a month, the prosecutor in Johnson County, Kansas, Steve Howe, declared that the fatal shooting was justified and charges would not be filed. Every year in America, police fatally shoot about 1,000 people. In each case, police, often from the same department, investigate the officer, and it's rare that details of the investigation are made public. Now, and that's a little, I don't know how it is everywhere else, but here we have shooting teams from other jurisdictions. Over in Missouri, if there's a KCPD shooting, Missouri Highway Patrol will investigate it. And over here, there's a county-wide, I guess they do mention. I'll just read here and I'll back up if I have to. But in the case of the death of Albers, something extremely unusual happened. The city of Overland Park released the entire police investigative file after being sued by KSHB TV. In this case, Overland Park Police did not investigate their own officer. Instead, Johnson County launches an officer-involved shooting investigating team after each such incident, using officers from other departments in the county. That's right. Written reports and photos from the investigation were made public, as well as videos, including dash cam recordings that captured the shooting, and the police interview with Clayton Jennison, the officer who shot Albers and said he feared he'd be struck by the van. I'm going to say something about that in a minute. The nearly 500-page file revealed the investigation was concluded in 6 days. The Washington Post provided it to 5 law enforcement experts, veterans of policing, use of force investigations, and prosecutions. All 5 found flaws with the investigation, and several said investigators approached the case favoring the perception of the officer. That's right, a stance that experts said is common in such cases. The Post's analysis found steps missing from the investigative report, such as scene diagrams that some experts said were typically performed in officer-involved shooting investigations. That's right. The Post also created a 3D reconstruction to show Jennison's position at each of the moments he fired at Albers. The reconstruction was based on available evidence. It used a combination of drone flyovers, laser scan geometry, and low-resolution dashboard cameras to recreate the incident within a reasonable margin of error. Jennison was close to the van when it first backed out of the garage, and then briefly in the path of the van after it spun around, but he moved after the van's path each time and then fired. Videos included with the file and the post-reconstruction show. Immediately after the shooting, Jennison said, "I thought he was going to run me over." He later told investigators, "From my memory, it felt like it was going fast enough to be a threat and to cause bodily harm to me." That's BS. District Attorney Howe noted that officers are entitled to use deadly force if they reasonably believed it is necessary to prevent death or great bodily harm. What we got here? To themselves or someone else. Ed Obayashi, a California sheriff's deputy who trains police in conducting investigations of officer-involved shootings, reviewed the case file and said that the most glaring flaw of the entire investigation is the interview of Jennison. All they did was one short interview lasting less than 45 minutes. He said a follow-up interview with questions developed from the advancing investigation is necessary in every case. We always go back to the witnesses and re-interview them. There's no reason the officer wouldn't consent to a follow-up. That's right. In the 2 years after, in 2020, 2 years after the shooting, the Justice Department announced it launched its own investigation of Jennison's killing of Albers. Sean Reynolds, the leader of the investigation, as a former deputy chief in Olathe, Kansas, and now the police chief in Temple, Texas, declined to discuss the investigation, as did Howe, the district attorney of Johnson County. Presented with a summary of the Post findings, Howe said in an email that many of your conclusions are factually incorrect, BS, but said he could not elaborate because of the ongoing federal investigation, which does not prohibit Howe from discussing the local investigation. That's right. Detectives involved in the case did not respond or would not speak to the Post, nor would anybody from Johnson County Crime Lab. Jennison and his lawyer also declined to comment. Sure. The Post took the police investigative file, dash cam videos, expert analysis, interviews with the Albers family, and the 3D construction to create an inside look into how police investigated one of their own. Watch the film above for a deep dive into the case. And when you go to the link down there, watch that video. It explains everything. An update on this just came out. The Justice Department announced September 9, 2022, that it would not file federal criminal rights charges against Officer Jennison. Now I'm skipping to another because it does not clear the high bar. Okay. This officer was out of control. they were being sent. What had happened, and maybe it talks about this in the video, but this young man had problems. He was adopted. He was an adopted Russian orphan, as a matter of fact. He lived with his family for some time, and he had some issues. He had some problems. The family was out to dinner. He texted some friends that, he was considering self-harm. They called the parents. They got a hold of the parents because he had put it up on Facebook. The parents called the police and asked them, please go by the house to check on our son. So they asked the police to please go help their son who was suicidal. The police show up. This Jennison shows up. It turns out later there was an investigation into him, and I don't think that it contains that in here. He was a combat veteran recently back from the Middle East. He probably should never have been hired as a police officer. He does not show the restraint. He does not show the judgment required of a police officer. See, policing in the United States is not supposed to be a combat operation. And when he showed up, he was standing to the side of the garage. The garage door opens. The van starts to back out slowly, like you would back out a van. He steps out of the way. The van passes him. He shoots several times into the van, later claiming he was in fear for his life. The van then goes and does kind of a rear U-turn because the kid has probably already been shot and now he's out of control. Jennison pops another 10 or 11 rounds into that van, hitting that 16-year-old kid with problems 6 times. When you watch this, hopefully you'll be sick to your stomach. And then the cover-up begins. And like I said, I saw this officer about an hour after it happened. I'm not going to go into details as why or where I was that I saw him. But he was already spinning it up, making excuses. I thought I was in fear of my life. You will see by watching this video, he was never in fear of his life. He was out to kill somebody. He was out to be big man with a gun. This is what we have to get rid of. This is what we have to prepare for. This is what we're having to deal with right now. Now, most of you know that I'm former law enforcement. I am not against law enforcement. I am very much against out-of-control law enforcement. And this Jennison should have never been allowed to be on a police department anywhere. But one of the things is, he come back, he's a veteran, right? He's a combat veteran. And the police departments get that extra credit. It shouldn't get. As a matter of fact, there's a movement saying you need to be a certain number of years separated from combat before you should be considered for police work, because police work takes great restraint sometimes. Okay. That's all I'm going to say here. I'm going to put this up. I don't know how many people will watch this, but I think it's probably one of the most important videos that I've ever done, because more people need to see this. So if you will spread this around, that would be great. I won't end this with my usual tags that I do on each of the channels, because this, like I say, this is not a normal video. Such a tragedy, such a shame. And you know what? This officer didn't even have the decency to quit. He fought for his job, and then they made a deal. They paid him $70,000 to quit. I have no idea where he is now. He's probably out there somewhere so he can wear a gun and a badge somewhere else. Who knows? I'll leave it at that. I hope you all will watch this, and I hope you'll spread it around. And I will talk to you later.